story number 3 for this edition of The Rolling Stone takes us, it's a little bit lighter. That second story was pretty dark. This second story comes to us from North Carolina. And guess what it has to do with? It has to do with the good old Pledge of Allegiance. Because Louella Thompson, who is the chairwoman of the Bladen County, North Carolina Board of Elections, threatened American citizens with the police, okay? With police retaliation, police coming in and arresting them if they recited the Pledge of Allegiance at the next Board of Elections meeting. Okay, so what happened? Here's a little background, okay? 2 board members and a good chunk of attendees at the last Board of Elections meeting in Bladen County, they were upset that the majority of the board, okay, had not put the Pledge of Allegiance in the itinerary of the meeting. Usually, these county meetings, they are very, especially the beginnings when you're just going through ceremonial things, usual, things that you do at every meeting. It's very, very detailed. What you'll have, the opening, then you'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, then you'll have the reading of the minutes from the last meeting, etc., etc. Well, these 2 board members and a good chunk of the attendees of the meeting were upset that the Pledge of Allegiance was not part of the itinerary of this particular meeting. Okay? It wasn't included. So the 2 protesting board members led everyone in the audience who wanted to recite the Pledge of Allegiance in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And again, a good chunk of the people at the meeting did. They wanted to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and they followed when these 2 board members led the Pledge of Allegiance. But in doing that, they received the wrath of the chairwoman, Louella Thompson. She said that this was out of order for the meeting, and she said that if it happened again at the next meeting, she would actually call the police and have them arrest everyone who disrupted the meeting by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Anyone who disrupted the meeting by saying the Pledge of Allegiance was going to have the police called on them and arrested, okay, according to Louella Thompson. Now, in the first place, calling the police because people say the Pledge of Allegiance at a Board of Elections meeting doesn't even make any sense according to the logic of the left. Okay, for the longest time, the left has been saying that you cannot compel people. You cannot make people say the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem. That's compelled speech. That goes against the First Amendment. I have a First Amendment right not to say the Pledge of Allegiance if I don't want to. Now, I disagree with that, and I will get into why I disagree with that in just a second. But let's just for the moment assume that assumption is correct, okay? That you cannot compel someone to say the Pledge of Allegiance because that's compelled speech. That violates the First Amendment. Okay? Well, if that's the case then, neither can you compel people to not say the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? Because that's compelled speech just as much as forcing people to say the Pledge of Allegiance, okay? Threatening people with police action and arrest for simply saying the Pledge of Allegiance when they want to say the Pledge of Allegiance, that is threatening people and preventing them, okay, from exercising their First Amendment rights, it would seem like to me. So if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Right? If you don't want to be compelled to say the Pledge of Allegiance, you can't compel me to not say the Pledge of Allegiance. And by this logic, you should say that the solution would be anyone who wants to say the Pledge of Allegiance, stand up and say it. Anyone who doesn't, just sit down, twiddle your thumbs, get on Facebook, whatever. You would think that would be the solution if we accepted that premise, right? That saying the Pledge of Allegiance is compelled speech. But the problem is, that premise is incorrect, okay? And it's incorrect for this purpose. We have to have a degree of conformity in society. Conformity is a very scary word, especially for people on the right who immediately see images of authoritarians and black shirts and everything, peeking through keyholes, making sure that everyone is reading their Bible or, playing tiddlywinks on Friday night instead of going out and having a drink, okay? The problem is that this is completely wrong, because no matter how you slice or dice it, there has to be an element of conformity in society. It's actually kind of funny, but the left is actually kind of correct about this, okay? All of their talk about intersectionality and all of their talk about cancel culture and fighting white supremacy and white nationalism, etc., it's coming from this realization that there has to be conformity in society, okay? The left is correct that there has to be conformity in society. They're wrong, however, in their idea of conformity, because their ideas of human nature, freedom, political society, family, etc. are all 180 degrees wrong, flat out wrong, okay? But even though their specifics are wrong, the inclination, the understanding, however vague it is, that there has to be some level of conformity in society is true, okay? And one of the people who talked about this a lot was the late, great philosopher, Roger Scruton, who passed away very sadly this past week on Sunday, I believe it was. He was one of the leading lights of Europe and the Western world in general. I mean, not only was he a genuine philosopher, when so many people today who carry that moniker are frauds, okay? So not only was he an actual genuine philosopher, but he was a grade A philosopher, and more than that, he was actually a man of action, which is very odd for any person who is part of academia. Not saying that it is unheard of, I'm just saying that it is more rare, okay, to find men of action in academia. For better or worse, the understanding of academics is fuddy-duddy old men, who putter around the classroom, the library, and the museum before going home to their apartment so that they can go to sleep and then repeat the process all over again. And then when they keel over, a young whippersnapper who has high hopes of attaining fuddy-duddery, as his old age comes across to him, they sweep out his corpse and he's replaced by a younger one, right? And the process repeats itself. The circle of life is continued. Sir Roger was not like that. He was a man of action. During the 70s and 80s, for example, he would actually sneak across the border from free Western Europe to the Soviet bloc in Eastern Europe and teach clandestine groups of people philosophy, teach them Plato and Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas and Jacques Maritain and Kant and Hegel and all these guys, okay? Anyway, that's who we lost last Sunday, which is, again, I don't think the world fully realizes how much we have lost with the death of Roger Scruton. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. To get back on point here with social conformity, the late Roger Scruton said that we need an element of social conformity for there to be a society at all, right? Because if there is no conformity, if there is no agreed upon, if there is no agreement, not just about the basic rules of society, but just the general conduct in society, we're talking about lowest common denominator stuff here, gang, okay? Then we have no society at all. We just have chaos of individual people clashing against each other. Furthermore, Roger Scruton said that social conformity is different from political conformity. Where political conformity, you are correct in thinking about, for example, Nazi Germany or Franco Spain or the Soviet Union, where failure to conform in any way, shape, or form was a political crime. Okay, another example: North Korea. Kim Jong-un is, Kim Jong-il is the dictator now of North Korea. But when his dad, Kim Jong-un, was the dictator, there was a law passed that every family, every household had to have a picture of the glorious supreme leader above their mantle. And it couldn't get dusty. If it got dusty, that was a capital offense. They would haul you to jail. You could be executed. Okay? That's what I'm talking about and Roger Scruton is talking about when he's talking about political conformity. No. We don't want that. What he's saying is that we need social conformity, where things like disapproval and shame, giving people the cold shoulder for breaking the norms of society, where that is instituted. Not pleasant, not fun, But it comes from a place where, hey, you know what? We have agreed upon rules of behavior. We've agreed upon not just the rules of society, but we've agreed upon the basic principles of life here in forming a society. You broke them in a pretty big way. Therefore, you know what? Do your, not to sound like a medievalist, but, do your penance before you come all chummy to me. That's what Roger Scruton is talking about when he says that there is a need for social conformity. Otherwise, you have no society at all. And saying the Pledge of Allegiance before meetings, before sporting events, that's an example of this lowest common denominator social conformity. Even if you don't agree with it, even if you think that the U.S. is the great Satan, as Iran says, even if you think that it's the most terrible thing in the world, if you choose to live here, then the least that you can do is, if you find yourself at a public government meeting or at a local government meeting or at a sporting event, when people say, stand up, take off your hats for the Pledge of Allegiance and National Anthem, you do that for the greater good, for that social glue. Because guess what? There are things that we all have to do that we might not want to do for the greater good of society, to hold that society together. Because we intrinsically realize that having a society where there is order, a place where we can exercise freedom, a place where we can have justice, theoretically, is better than no society where the only rule is chaos, right? And again, we need this conformity, otherwise we don't have society. We just have this chaos, okay? And like we've also said before here on The Stone, if people are not trained to love their country, okay, and saying the Pledge of Allegiance is a small outward demonstration of this love. If people are not taught to love their country, okay, then how are they going to actually have the love and therefore the courage and the will and the determination to fight for her if that time ever comes? You don't even have to make it as bold as that. How are they going to have the love and the willingness to actually improve her for the good? They're not going to, okay? It basically just shoots yourself in the foot, okay, by making the Pledge of Allegiance and all these little things of social conformity, these little traditions, these little actions that we do that we've just grown up with, that most of us don't even give 2 seconds thought about, okay? If they are gone, okay, it just takes us closer and closer and closer to that chaos. It takes us closer and closer to the complete dissolution of society. But, as usual, I have talked too much, gang. So, I will sign off now. Wish you a very happy weekend. If it is actually snowy and winter where you are, like it is where I am, be safe, be careful, have fun in the snow if that's your thing. I will see you on Tuesday. Ciao, gang.